Hey kids, want to know what caused the rise or fall of the robots? And no one? No? Okay, well I'm going to tell you anyway, as per my content creating protocols. So yeah, this one is usually in the conversation when you're talking about all-time duds, and certainly if you're staying 90s specific. Because it seems in just about every comic, wizard, or gaming magazine you saw an ad for Rise of the Robots, featuring this underdesigned, underwhelming, lifeless blue guy just standing there in his default pose. Look at him, just a black void of charisma. Doesn't hold a candle compared to Super Robo Chad Astar.
I am Astar, a robot. I can put my arm back on. You can't, so play safe.
Like it or not though, this image takes up a distinct and shadowy corner of your mind palace if you owned a 90s video game system. It also might be one of the earliest examples of overhyping and under-delivering I can think of in the industry, a tradition which still continues to this very day. So grab your motherboards and I don't even want to do this. Yeah, fuck it, we're just doing Rise of the Robots. Let's go! In a 1993 issue of Edge, the magazine proudly declared that these graphics, these were to die for, which is something that has aged about as good as, you know. This was Rise of the Robots, a brand new fighting game to take on the likes of the Street Fighters and the Mortal Kombats that were so popular with the kids. I mean, it was 1993 overall, which is cited by many as being the very apex of the fighting game boom, and everyone wanted a bite of that rising taco.
Rising taco!
The company busy bolting and welding these robots together was the UK studio MIRAGE Technologies, who, in addition to publishing games from some smaller teams, also developed them as well. Kinda. Their only real pre-robots game I can find any solid info on is Ashes of Empire. And when I say info, I mean I know its name and here's its box art. The core team within Mirage on Rise of the Robots, however, was a mere 5 strong and was being led by ex-Bitmap Brother employee Sean Griffiths, who had sufficient experience with game design, but that wasn't something that could be said about the rest of the crew. The coders and background artists on the project had zero commercial game experience themselves, which, when combined with a massively overhyped marketing campaign, can and has led to the What Happened episode you are currently watching. Now, don't get me wrong, graphically the game in 1993 was really impressive, using Autodesk's 3D Studio software to produce a clean, slick image, which, while different from the Silicon graphics workstations that Rare was then using, was still largely the same in principle. The game impressed enough that Time Warner Interactive, who were all about throwing money at things to sort of force their way into the game industry, immediately came a call-in. Absolute Entertainment held the rights to the original formats the game was being targeted for, namely the Amiga and IBM PCs. Plans then escalated to try and make robots big, Mortal Kombat big, and thus it was set to spin off into comics, toys, novels, and even a feature film if you can believe it. Oh god, I really want this to have happened. Like, just give it to me. I want it. And release the Lucas kind of Dragon Ball Evolution while you're at it. Of course, the best way to make it big at this time was to release on consoles. The hottest consoles, like the Philips CDI, the Panasonic 3DO, and the mighty Game Gear. Yes, this is where things get a tad messy, because 3 different publishers were now in talks, all wanting their own fancy 3D modeled robots. They decided to split up the rights per region and per system, as was the style at the time. Acclaim scooped up the SNES port, while Time Warner and Absolute fought over the rest. Why did the Jaguar get left out, by the way? It was made to play garbage like this. Just put it up there with Fight for Life, Ultra Vortec, and Kasumi Ninja, all of which I own. All told, the robots would rise on 8 different formats, which was something usually reserved for big, surefire arcade hits, proven successes that were then being brought over to the home market. Here though, with the fervor stirred up by the stunning graphics, it very much seemed like all the publishers involved assumed they would just skip to the smash success part. Compounding all of this was the fact that neither Sean Griffiths or anyone on his team had ever even worked on a fighting game before, which was kind of a big deal if you were boasting how you were going to dethrone Capcom. We're going to be using robots that fight and act unusually with a very high level of artificial intelligence that has never been seen before. We'll definitely have one over on Street Fighter 2. Hey there, buddy! Congratulations on the OOF medal! With the increased budget and exposure from all these publishers, other things started to fall into place for the team before it all started to fall apart. While working, they had become infatuated with former Queen guitarist Brian May's solo album, Back to the Light, and wanted him to record the game's full soundtrack. Like, they really wanted this to happen, cause the Rise of the Robots box art proudly declares this. Now, let's not mince words. Queen, one of the greatest bands in history. But what was the thought process behind this? If you were like a 13-year-old snot-faced kid in the 90s who wanted to play a dumb robot fighting game like I was, did you also go, oh man, they got Brian May too? Fuck yeah! Like the rest of the game's development, this didn't really work out in the end though. Mr. May did in fact record a full soundtrack, but disputes with his record label caused delays in the deal and held the work back long enough that it simply couldn't be included by shipping time. Now, I know what you're screaming. Well, what's his name still doing on the box? The name that's super close to the robot, making little baby kid Matt think that the robot itself was called Brian May. Well, that's because the game's title screen track has about a 5-second guitar snippet from one of Brian's songs off his original album. So, like many things Rise of the Robots, it was all filled with lies.
Everything is lies! Everything is lies!
All of this was being bankrolled by a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign that sought to really push this blue dork right in your face, despite the fact that the game was always going to be humble and basic, even by mid-90s standards. In single-player mode, you only had control of Brian May, and would then take on a whopping 6 other fighters, and that's it. In 2-player mode, you can control any of the characters and perform their 2 special moves, and that's it. This is because the team were working so feverishly on the graphics and porting to so many other formats that it left very little time to work on anything else. The AI was certainly trying to be a selling point though, as it was one of the few new gameplay features that the game was touting. While it was marketed as some neural net processor, a learning computer, it actually meant that the game would just read your inputs and then react to them in a very binary way. If you spammed a special move like this awesome one here, it simply wouldn't work against the AI more than 2 or 3 times, leading to a restrictive fighting system where it just punishes everything you do, except for jump kicks. This was, however, made even worse because the fighting system itself in general was so incredibly stripped down. No super moves, real combos, OTGs, juggles, it just wound up feeling very stiff and rudimentary, almost as if the team had no idea what they were doing. And with them being stretched so thin with all the console ports, Rise of the Robots then suffered a long delay as a result. While originally scheduled for February of 1994, it instead had to be shifted to November of that same year. The reason for this? To continue to perfect the graphics and enhance the gameplay as much as possible. So the months pushed on with the hype train full steam ahead. All the while, more complex and flashy looking fighting games were entering the ring. Mirage's fellow Brits at Rare released Killer Instinct for arcades in the meantime, making it the first CGI-rendered fighting game. Not to mention, there was also X-Men Children of the Atom, Tekken, King of the Fighters, and Darkstalkers. No matter how you sliced it, all of these games were already far beyond what Mirage was doing in terms of gameplay. things started to get a bit dire when previews hit print magazines, which, while certainly being enthusiastic, couldn't really comment on how these robots handled, as no one was allowed to actually play it. Mirage staffers and PR would talk it up, cite all the impressive man-hours they were committing to the visuals and AI, but no one was allowed to go hands-on, not even journalists invited to the studio. This was a bit of an orange flag, maybe, not quite up to red yet, because that would start waving in due time. The Amiga version shipped first, and on a staggering 13 floppy disks, which you need to swap every time you fought a new robot. That's how intensive the graphics were for the old Amiga. The rest of the release was something of an incredible mess. The SNES version hit a month later in December and would come to North America, Europe, and even Japan. Oh man, I'd love to see Japanese Rise of the Robots money matches. The Genesis version, well, there was no Genesis version because it released only in Europe, so if you were a Sega fan and didn't own a Mega Drive, you were shit out of luck. Same if you were one of the dozens of Game Gear owners who hated themselves because they wanted to play a game that looked like this. Also, due to the complexity of shrinking everything down to sorta kinda fit on a Mega Drive cartridge, it was delayed for an additional 2 months to February of 1995 because, of course it was. Print magazines, since they needed such long lead-up times to coincide with game launches, didn't get any of their carts until a mere few days before stores did. Usually, advanced copies were sent to EGM, Amiga Power, and the like, so that the reviews would come out roughly the same time as the game, but they were intentionally held back just for this purpose, something we'll get back to in a minute. Okay, so the novel, yes! The novel. The novel actually did come out the same month as the Mega Drive port, so anyone watching at home right now, please leave a quick review in the comments if you've actually read this, because I'm dying to know about all the cybernetic drama. Finally, the cartoon, the comics, the toys, the hentai, the movie, they were all regrettably cancelled, which shouldn't come as much of a surprise. I'm actually really bummed by this because, I mean, Virtua Fighter, Primal Rage, and Killer Instinct all got schlocky American comics. I mean, come on, throw these robots a robo-bone. Then, a good 30 days after each version had hit stores, the reviews finally hit as well, and boy, did they hit hard. Electronic Gaming Monthly's legendary Sushi X awarded it a 4 out of 10. GamePro gave a probably more than fair for the Game Gear version, but nobody came out of the gate swinging more than Amiga Power, which slapped it with a 5 out of 100, which, while certainly shining a light on how ridiculous an out of 100 rating system is, was certainly still a damning indictment. The game was just plain boring to both look at and to play, with static backgrounds that lacked a single animated pixel. Rogue Tour did sport CGI video clips, which were especially impressive for the Super Nintendo, but they didn't actually make the game any better, and also weren't exactly enthralling in a narrative sense. Now, while I mentioned all the fighting game competition that was around in late 94 and early 95, there was one game which completely invalidated Rise of the Robots, and that was One Must Goddamn Fall 2097, released 1 month earlier in October on MS-DOS, and was better than Mirage's effort in every conceivable way. Irregardless, due to those delayed reviews and the unstoppable force that is hype, Rise of the Robots was still a commercial success. I mean, it didn't do Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter numbers, but it was enough to pave the way for a PlayStation and Saturn 1996 sequel, Rise 2: Resurrection.
Cyborg wins.
And it actually wasn't much better. Now, on paper, it should have been. It featured over a dozen selectable bots, had fatalities, and a fully original Brian May song called Cyborg. At least they made that happen, but in terms of how it played, looked, and sounded, well, I mean... That same year, Mirage also released something called Bedlam? I've never seen this before. What is this? And since both games absolutely bombed in stores this time around, Mirage then closed its doors in early 1997. This is definitely a lesson of a game's hype outstripping its actual design and ambition. It was just going to be a basic button basher for the Amiga, but due to Absolute or Mirage or whoever's desire for Mortal Kombat style money bucks, it quickly crashed and burned due to an almost overwhelmingly negative reception upon release, and remains one of the 1990s biggest disasters. As for Sean Griffiths, well, he would go on to Rebellion Entertainment, where he produced 2009's Rogue Warrior
Black Razor.
I can't make this stuff up, people. That's why I love doing this show. If you know of any other massive misfires of malfunctioning machinery, let me know in the comments below, send me a message through cyberspace on my Twitter, or head on over to the Flophouse VIP Patreon and become a big boss and nominate the episode you'd like to see next. And if you've been fancying a sparkling fresh t-shirt, mug, mask, or poster, then head on over to pixelempire.com/McMuscles to check out some new merch. See you next time, and thanks for watching.